Hey everyone, Mario Palma here, Vice President of Multilingual Teaching and Learning. We are back with another Facebook Live, and we're so excited to have our conversation today. The title for today's conversation is Reading, Writing, and Relationship Building in Rapides Parish. Now, you're probably wondering, Rapides, where have I heard that word before? Well, Rapides is a collection of one of the 19 parishes in Louisiana. And it was created in the 1800s, so it's a rather old and distinguished parish. But the name was really cool. It was named after the rapids in Red River. And I didn't know that. And it sounds a little French, right? So we know that name was when it was under French rule, but under Spanish rule, it was called El Rápido. So I realized that there's so much language history in this region, as there is in every region. Just a lot of fun facts that we could talk about with Rapides. And I'm really excited about our conversation because we're going to talk about the nature of the relationship between the coach, the art coach, and those who are implementing, both at the parent, student, teacher, instructional coach, administrator level. So I'm excited to introduce our first two guests for today. We do want to acknowledge that Danielle Worley, who is the executive coach who is working on this project, was unable to be here with us. She had a family emergency. Everything's going to be okay, and we're sending her our love, and she'll be here with us in spirit. A couple of logistics. We always want to know who is in the house. So make sure that you are sharing your state, your district name, even your school name if you wish, and put that in the chat box. We want to know who's here. And while you're there, why not put a number 1 if you are listening to us live, and number 2 if you are replaying this Facebook Live. A number 3, if you are still within this hybrid learning environment, which many of our users are, or if you've done the full transition back to in-person, put a number 4. If you are in your classrooms, you got your students right in front of you, a little bit of normalcy, please put a 4 in the chat box. We are super proud of the work that you're doing as you transition. Not an easy task to do. And so with that, I'm going to transition it over to my friend Megan Smith. Introduce yourself, Megan.
Hey everyone, my name is Megan Smith and I am a district curriculum specialist for Rapides Parish. I work primarily with kindergarten through 2nd grade ELA teachers. And this is my 3rd year working with the Art Core curriculum and my 1st year working as a district support person with Art Core.
Thank you. Kelly.
Hi, I'm Kelly Tucker. I am a 2nd grade teacher here in Rapides Parish. I work at Tioga Elementary. This is my 6th full year of teaching 2nd grade, and I love it. And this is my 1st full year of ARC, but I had 3/4 of a year last year. So I'm excited to be with you today. Thanks for having us.
Thanks to have both of you here. So let's start with Megan. You have a unique perspective on this idea of implementing a new Art Core curriculum. Your area of expertise clearly is not just working with students, working with teachers, but curriculum design. You talk to us a little bit about how that experience was for you?
Yes, absolutely. So when I began working with the Art Core curriculum, I began as a master teacher at one school site here in Rapides Parish. And I always say it was very much the blind leading the blind that year because I was learning the curriculum at the same rate that the teachers in my school were. And so it was very challenging at times to really feel like I was giving them the best support that I could. But I really leaned on our art coach a lot that year to help have her coach me and give me the guidance that I needed to support our teachers in her absence. And so that year we really, and if you're working with, it's a lot of trial and error, but I really learned to trust in the phases of implementation and how important it is that you build the foundation through Unit 1 with the routines and procedures that are really integral to success in Art Core, both for the teachers and the students. And so as I've grown to learn more about that now as a district support role, it's really important to me with the schools and the teachers that I work with that I continue to immerse myself into the classroom, not just as a district support person, but as a teacher as well, because there's always so much more to be learned through the actual active teaching of the curriculum. And so that's how Kelly and I came to work together with this.
Awesome. Well, yeah, shout out to Dr. Karlberg, who was your coach in year 1. I know she's probably listening in. And why don't we pull up the stages of implementation? We're going to have our colleague, Michelle Lynch, pull that up so that we can kind of anchor this idea of what challenges and what opportunities come for year 1. So Megan, what would you say for people who are new to Art Core? What would you like them to know as they begin this work?
So as you begin this work with ArtCore, it's just in our nature as teachers that we want to know it all right away. And we want to have everything perfect for ourselves and for our students from the beginning. But just in the same way that we tell our students that it's important to feel safe to not be successful right away and to try and to learn from those experiences, it's really important with that here. I know as Kelly and I have taught together, there's been moments that we've looked at each other and said, this isn't working. This is just not okay. And we regroup and go back the next day. And Mario actually earlier mentioned that in the same way that we look at our students with the ERLA and we diagnose where they're at and we work with them at their level to move on to the next level, it's the same with these stages of implementation that are given to us from the beginning with the implementation of ArtCore. And as we build that foundation, we move into the next phase when we're ready and when our classrooms and our teachers are ready to do that. So I think it's just really important that we trust the process. That was something that I heard Dr. Carlberg say many times, and I've heard Danielle say, and any number of other art coaches. And it's just hard for us as teachers to let go of that control when we're trying something new, and it's easy to want to revert back to the things that we're comfortable with. And so as you're going into this implementation, just know that it's okay to go at the end of the day and think that wasn't great, and look at your colleagues. And when your art coach comes to visit, you don't have to smile and say, oh, it's going great. You can say, I'm really struggling with this, and the art coaches are there to support you and to help you. There is no graded paper at the end of the day.
Yeah.
It's there as a support system. And so anyone who's working with an art coach, be it a teacher or a district support person, it's just really important to have that transparency and know that it's okay to be vulnerable and it's okay to make mistakes and then learn from them and come back the next day better, the same way that we want our students to.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when you make a mistake, it's because you're probably getting better at the task that you're trying to get better at, right? Mistakes are part of mastering what we're trying to learn new. So let's move on to Kelly. I want to get a teacher's perspective here. How was the 3 quarters you had last year? What was a moment that you were most proud of?
Well, I would say, any new curriculum is going to be difficult. And then, of course, the craziness of last year hit. But being in the first year of it, I told you guys before, I think that, like Megan was talking about those stages of implementation, being able to focus not on everything, because I am definitely a person of routine and structure, and I resist change. So, being able to adapt and know that I'm not going to be able to check everything off my list for that day or that curriculum is okay. But I really fell in love with the ERLA portion and being able to, you're always, as an educator, you're trying to meet the needs of every student in your classroom. You're trying to reach them in some way. And I feel like with the ERLA, you're able to sit down and you're able to chat with them about what do they love about reading, what subjects do they like to read about, and then you're able to diagnose and see what they've been struggling with, meet them where they are, provide them with resources and content that is, applies to what they need to move forward. And that's our end goal. So I would say I feel most excited and proud about my first year of just falling in love with that and transferring that love to my students and that love of reading and bringing that back in to them. So
you remind me of when I was in the classroom, when I first started using the ERLA, it was the perfect tool to get me to get better at kid watching. I always thought that I was paying attention to what my students were actually doing, but I wasn't watching what their mouths were doing. I wasn't watching where on the page their eyes were going. The quality of my questions about investigating their literacy and language lifestyles wasn't as good as it could be. So, so I relate to your experience in that regard with the ERLA. Megan, I have a question for you. What kind of advice would you give administrators who are in their first year implementing? Let's look at the administrator lens for a second. What would you say?
The biggest advice that I can give to anyone in a leadership position that is implementing the ArtCore curriculum is to teach it, is to partner with teachers on your campus. Immerse yourself in that classroom, plan the lessons, get in there and get your hands dirty with it. I learned very quickly that this was not a curriculum I was going to be able to support my teachers with by sitting in a chair and observing the classroom. When I would speak to the teachers I was working with about the challenges that they were having, it was hard for me to really empathize with what was going on. And so I finally asked my teacher, like, can I come in and teach? And that just made all the difference in the world. And I never would have learned this curriculum had I not done that. And so I'm lucky that I had that opportunity as a school leader to be able to do that. And so whether you're a district support person, a school leader, that is the biggest impact that you can make, is just to go in the classroom and teach. I was an upper grade elementary teacher. I came to lower grades with Art Core. And so I always knew that my upper grade kids, they were struggling readers. I never knew why, and I never knew how to fix it. Yeah. And so by immersing myself into the work with this curriculum and going into the classrooms, be it kindergarten, first or second grade, that made a huge impact on me, changed who I was as a teacher, and changed the way that I was able to support the teachers that I had been tasked with working with.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about the stages of implementation, and we know that that's what anchors the first literacy launch, right? Those first few weeks of setting up your systems. I could speak to the systems that I set up in the classroom, initiating an academic community, making sure that there's an avid reading culture. Those are just some of the cornerstones of setting up those literacy systems at the classroom level. Megan, could you talk about what systems at the building and district level you were a part of? Again, through that administrator lens, what systems made a difference in that implementation?
The systems that I think made the biggest difference in the implementation were absolutely the relationships that we were able to develop with American Reading Company, the coaches that were in our schools, and the work that we did through leadership learning series with the art coaches, as well as our Friday Zoom calls that we would have with school building leaders and art coaches, and the opportunity to share celebrations and challenges that we were having at the school level. But that open communication that is always there between the schools, the district, and the art coaches and those that are supporting us from American Reading Company makes all the difference in the world. It's easy. I know Rapides Parish is just one small area that American Reading Company supports, but I feel like our coaches only support us because we do talk so much and everyone is so available and so ready and willing to help with the things that we need. So that communication structure between the schools, the district, and American Reading Company, and just it being very cyclical and very open, has made a huge difference to us in our implementation.
Yeah, I mean, the coach works tirelessly, just from a coach perspective, because I do have coaching relationships with a lot of districts across the country. The work that happens behind the scenes often goes unnoticed. Setting up those communication loops, making sure the feedback is specific to each teacher's needs, making sure that principals are meeting with teachers to look at data. I mean, there are countless systems that the coach is working in tandem with administrators to set up, but we love doing it. I mean, that's why we choose to be coaches. So thank you for lifting that up. You brought up relationships. So I want to know, what's your relationship with Kelly? Megan and Kelly, talk to us a little bit about how you guys interact. What's this kind of love fest going on here?
Well, I can take this one if you'd like me to.
Yeah,
first, I do want to say, before I talk about our relationship, I do want to shout out to Danielle, because she helped to carry me through my first year. And that was at a point where she was able to come and be with us and really asking us, what can I do to help? Here, laying it out for us, offering any support and encouragement at any time that we needed it. She knows that I would email her or, anything that I needed. She was there, just like Megan was saying. So shout out to her for that whole first year and this year as well. I know it's been a little more difficult being with all our different rules this year and restrictions in the classroom, but she's still been just as available, just as helpful and encouraging and supportive, highlighting our successes and then pushing us for those next steps, that growth. And so I just definitely wanted to share that. But as far as the relationship that Megan and I have, like she said, we did work 1 year together at the same school teaching. But this year in her new role, she's been even more available to us for those same things, getting resources or going to her. She would meet with me and my second grade team in our planning time to help us plan lessons, help us figure out what strategies have been working for us, what's not working, what we can do, to help meet those needs of our students. And it's just been really great because, as a classroom teacher, you don't often have other teachers that are coming in and teaching your students. And so to have someone at the district level come in and take that time to not only help me, but to get to know my students and work with them has been really awesome. And, it's given me more confidence this year to be like, okay, sometimes, yes, I don't know everything there is to know. So to get and put together her expertise and knowledge with the curriculum and then my knowledge of my students and really couple that together for the best that we could do for these students has been so impactful this year on my teaching.
Sounds like there was a lot of trust, a lot of collaboration, almost like a co-teaching model that was happening in this relationship. You talked a lot about how you grew, a proud moment that you had. What shift did you see? What change did you see in your students, Kelly? And what kind of evidence did you see of that change?
Sure. I would say at the first part of the year, we had been away from the classroom for months and students were out of routines, out of habits, out of practice. They had all of this time to not pick up a book and read. So just for one, the engagement of students in their love of reading. I saw that last year that their love of reading was growing with this new curriculum, but at the beginning of this year, it was a challenge. Coming back into all of those routines and procedures, like I said, was a challenge. But as we got back into things, we started seeing it, it was rolling, it was going. And we finally started to see that come back, and they were excited as we were moving through the units to see what the next unit and, going from the research units, they were excited to go, learn just new things that they, I guess, just being off for such a long time, they finally were getting it. Like, I'm so glad to be back. I'm so glad to be learning and reading again. And then they got excited about leveling up. And for anybody who's new, that term is talking about in their ERLA levels, leveling up to the next level in the ERLA and their reading level. So that was a success of just getting them back and engaged. And I think Megan mentioned this also about building their stamina. We talk a lot about that at the beginning of the year and that reading culture and building their stamina. So the evidence of that is now whenever our time is up for reading for the day, when they do their independent reading, they don't want to stop. So that's evidence enough to me that they are loving it and they are engaged and they're ready for more. The other thing that I would say would be definitely writing. As a classroom teacher, again, I said writing is always my hardest subject to teach. It's something I struggle with, and I will be very open and honest about that. We all have our strengths and our weaknesses, and writing is just not my strength. So I think one of the most impactful things was to have Megan come in, plan with me, teach with me, and then also show me. She modeled, as we model for our students, she modeled for me some ways that are helpful in using the rubrics in our writing. So if you're looking at that rubric now, a student might look at our rubric and be a little intimidated and think, can I do this? This is a lot, but the way that Megan and I work together is, she would come in and we'd break it down and she would model throughout, we would have our morning message and talk about what we were going to do for that day. And then we would read a text and then talk about how did the author that wrote that text, did they score all their points on this rubric? And so going back into doing that, and then she would model a writing piece that she did for them. So she would model and write for them, and then they would grade her or myself, whoever had written that day. And the students loved that. And it was engaging for them. It was exciting. Anytime that they get to grade their teacher or an adult on anything, they are engaged and focused and loving that. So it made a lot more sense to them to break down the rubric in this way. So then they, in turn, when they go to do their own writing, they were able to check off the things that they're doing. Have I earned a point for introducing my topic and stating my opinion? Have I earned a point on this rubric for giving my reasons and my evidence to support those opinions? And just going down and really fully taking ownership of their writing. And so I think that has been to see from them coming in to writing, sentences that sometimes would not fit anywhere on that rubric, just being honest, to pieces that were acceptable and met the requirements of the rubric. And they were able to get excited that they were able to earn all 5 points on this rubric. Yeah. And so then to carry that over and be able to write a whole opinion piece, I mean, that's the end goal of, we want them to be able to do the things that they need to do to move on to that next level. So
yeah, I mean, the rubric is huge, right? Every single unit after Lit Labs has a specific writing, a specific rubric towards the writing product that students are going to work towards at the end of the unit, and that becomes the criteria, right? The contract essentially of what a quality opinion piece might look like, what a quality narrative piece might look like. And it becomes that the anchor for collaborative peer review, right? When students are sitting together and checking each other's work. This idea of seeing my teacher's work and having students use the rubric against my writing. I mean, what a better way to create a community of writers. And what's great about Lit Labs is that kids get to write across all different writing genres, and then they hone in on those specific writing genres across all of the subsequent units. So yeah, probably one of my favorite tools is the rubric because it's just clarity, right? It makes it clear about what I need to work on throughout that unit. So thank you for bringing that up. So we've talked a lot about writing. We've talked a lot about relationships. Megan gave some advice to administrators. Kelly, anything you want to share with other teachers who might be new to implementing ArtCore? Any must-dos? Any favorite resources besides the rubric?
Okay. First, I would say, as far as resources, one thing that I really fell in love with this year as a resource were the lab notebooks. And if Michelle, she may want to pull that up for us now. The lab notebooks, I was introduced to them last year, but again, being that first year teacher, you're overwhelmed, you're trying to figure everything out. It's not going to happen. You're not going to figure everything out, but this year I can add something else in, right? So looking at the lab notebooks, I really like to focus in on these pages that are, well, first of all, if you don't know anything about the lab notebooks, it's one book that has everything that you need pretty much in it. You've got your organizers, graphic organizers, but what I really wanted to focus on were those weekly lesson goals or weekly goals. Here we are. And so it shows you for that week, what you're supposed to be learning, doing, reading, and then also the daily lesson pages. It gives a focal point for you to look at. I am, like I said before, I'm a very routine, structured person. I like a checklist. I love when I get to check things off a list. So if I have an outline, it makes everything a lot easier for me to focus. So using those daily lesson checklist was easy for me to tie into our morning message to help the students know the expectations and the goals for that particular day, and everything was right there for them. So if you're new or you're about to implement this curriculum, or if you've already started but you're not aware of these lab notebooks, I love them. And especially for when you are doing the research units or when you get to writing, there are writing pages as well, writing the templates, and they also have the rubrics on them. And thank you, Michelle, for flipping through there and finding all those awesome resources. But these would probably be my favorite resource that I connected with this year.
Yeah, the student notebooks are probably one of our biggest labors of love through the pandemic. We worked tirelessly nights and weekends to make sure that online instruction was just as good as in-person instruction was. So thank you for bringing that up. I mean, I'm looking through these pages, and as a student, there's just so much clarity that every day I'm reading and I'm writing to complex text. Every day I get to research about a topic with very specific research questions and building that discipline-specific vocabulary. Every day I get to speak about what I write. I mean, it really is in one fell swoop, everything I need to know in that student notebook. So I'm sure many teachers are in the same, they feel the same way as you do, Kelly, about that. Megan, we haven't heard from you in a little bit. Any other advice about year two? I know we're winding down. We just have a few minutes left, but year two can be kind of different than year one. What are your thoughts around year two?
Year two, in my personal experience, and I think Kelly can attest to this too, and I'm sure you've heard it from the things that she said. Year two for me was where the magic really happened, where it really started to become evident to me how all of the pieces fit together. Traditionally in our district, we were used to teaching things in isolation, where our phonics lesson would happen in isolation. Then we'd move on to the reading lesson, and it didn't always connect to what we had done in phonics. Then we'd move into writing or language and grammar, and sometimes that didn't connect to what we had done in reading. And so having come from being used to teaching things in such isolation, moving to this more integrated model was a difficult challenge in that first year. And so in the first year, we didn't feel like all the time, like, oh, I'm not teaching enough phonics. I'm not teaching enough grammar. I'm not teaching enough of this, that, or the other, because it looked so different than what we were used to. But in year two, once you've had that exposure to everything, you've gone through the trial and error, and then you come in and you're able to have those aha moments and see how everything fits together. You're able to see how once you've diagnose your students' reading needs through the ERLA, how those foundational skills toolkits come into play, how that connects into what we're doing. Kelly touched on morning message, how I can bring those pieces in, how I can really focus in on my individual student needs, and then connect that to the reading lesson. And when we're doing our independent reading, what's my power goal? What have I been practicing with my teacher during those foundational skill toolkit lessons? And carry that over into my writing. So I know for me as a teacher, that was a big impact I saw with my students when they were connecting. If I learned about this skill in my small group lesson, I don't just apply that to my reading, but I apply that in my writing as well. And so in year two, it all just came together. So there are those frustrations and challenges of year one, just as there are when you're learning anything new. But if you really do, I know I'm going to say again, trust that process and go through it, and then really start from the beginning in unit one and build that foundation and that love of reading and writing. Then when, like Mario said, then we're honing in on one specific topic, your students are going to have that joy, they're going to have that stamina, and they're going to have that desire to do the work and to be successful because they know they're going to grow and move on from there.
Yeah, I mean, I think you just described something that every district across the country is striving for: curricular coherence. You know, the through lines, pushing back and moving away from this siloed approach to literacy instruction, and really making clear connections with teachers that what you teach in one specific component really applies across all components. So I'm really thankful through the administrator lens for you to kind of highlight that, because year two often feels like it's a mile away or 20 miles away or a year away. You kind of want to get to the love that you find in year two in year one. But there's a lot of growth and a lot of shifts that need to happen in year one in order for year two to be successful. So we're going to end with this amazing question, right? Because this is what it's all about, right? What kind of results have you all experienced? How do you know that things are working? How do you know that kids are growing, that they love reading, and that they're acquiring the literacy skills that the curriculum, a high quality curriculum, is designed to achieve? What are your thoughts on results? We can start with Kelly, and then we can go to Megan.
Okay, so I would measure the results that I'm getting by one, the ERLA levels, that they're growing. They are growing. I mean, they can't move up unless they are acquiring those skills that they need, because as you move up in the levels, the text is more rigorous. All of those skills are needed to move on. They are not going to be able to read and comprehend and make those inferences and do all the things that they're going to need to do if they don't have those foundational pieces, that background knowledge that they need to go on. So,
right, and you see that from school pace, right? You're monitoring your data on school pace. You're able to see the kind of growth that each student has. Yeah,
Yes.
excellent.
You can see growth from, their initial leveling at the beginning of the year to the end. And then this is not something on the computer, but just I can't with data say this, but their level of excitement for reading. And then, anytime that they level up, it becomes kind of a competition with the students. They love leveling up and they love the excitement of it all. But just asking me for Miss Tucker, can I, check out some additional books? Can I, what books can I ask my parents about at home? What can I borrow some books? Their engagement, and then loving, they're sharing things that they've read at home. And I think that reading at home piece is extremely important as well. And to try to get them engaged at home, and their parents at home is to read to them or be read to. That's super important.
Yeah, you talk about quantitative data, right? That kind of numerical growth on school pace. And then you talked about a love metric, right? This qualitative data. You see this excitement going on. And I think what I learned most about the reading levels in the ERLA is that they explain what the skills are at each reading level. But students aren't necessarily their reading level. Their reading level might change depending on what their background knowledge is. But it's super important that I know what to expect in terms of text complexity as I'm growing across those levels. So thank you for highlighting that, Kelly. Megan, what would you say in terms of growth results that you've seen?
Well, I can say, as a person who I don't get to make the same relationships with the students that the teachers do. I don't get to see them every day. But as a district support person, when I walk into a school and I can have students any age from 4 to around 8 years old, they can all tell me exactly what they learned that day, what they're going to learn the next day, what they wrote about, and just how phenomenal is that. The students who they want to come and tell you everything about their lives and everyone in it, but their first thing is to run up to me and say, I am researching firefighters. I learned that they don't make enough money. And they want to tell me about why firefighters should make more money, or the ones that, like, did you know teachers should really get paid more? A student said that to me the other day. And so just seeing their love of what they're learning about, and they're developing these really strong, important opinions and sense of self by the things that they're learning about and that they're becoming as readers and writers, is just amazing to me. What they're just excitement about what they're learning, and they can tell you how many points they got on a rubric. And that I would have been tickled to have a 6th grader be able to do that. And so they're doing that at 7 years old. And it's just amazing, just the desire and that intrinsic motivation that's built through this process for them to grow as readers and writers.
Yeah, I hope that student who is advocating for higher teacher pay gets to work at the state level to make those very important decisions one day. We're going to end with a result that, Kelly, you should have said this, but I'm going to say it for you. I'm going to embarrass you, that you've doubled the number of proficient readers in your class this year. That is no easy task. And what better note to end our conversation today. So it's my pleasure to have had this conversation with you all. I hope that our Facebook teacher community is able to glean some lessons from your year 1 and year 2 implementation. If you have any feedback or any questions for our guests today, please put them in the chat box. And we will continue the conversation about year 1 and year 2 implementations, all of the opportunities for growth, all of the challenges, and the relationships that lie between the coach, the teacher, and between the teacher and the student. It's been my pleasure to host this Facebook Live. We'll be back soon. We'll tell you when. You got to keep following us on Twitter @American Reading, and we will shout out the next topic and next guest host. Thank you so much for seeing us. Talk to you soon. Bye-bye, friends.